With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, LuAnn Berry. You all know LuAnn Berry. She is our lead dietitian for the Diabetes Center, has been doing diabetes education for the past 10 years, does have a bachelor's from Clarion University. And one of the things that it gives me pleasure to introduce LuAnn about is I didn't always teach diabetes. My role with Passivant was I was hired to administrate and run the open heart program. And when we went through some reorganization of nursing, they asked me to do community education and then more or less told me I was going to be a diabetic educator. So just like you guys, when your doctors told you you all had diabetes, it's like, what? Same thing with me. It's like, I don't know nothing about no diabetes. So one of the first people that I met was LuAnn. Walked over to her office and said, I hate to tell you this, but we have to work together. And LuAnn has taught me over the 8 years we've worked together, just about everything I know. Okay?
No, I haven't.
So with that, one of the things that we've told all of you is 50% of handling your diabetes is knowing how to eat. How to eat, what to eat, why to eat, what you can't eat, and there really is nothing you can't eat. And with that, I'm going to let LuAnn explain how important it is for nutrition in diabetes. LuAnn, thank you.
Thanks. Just with a show of hands, how many people have diabetes here? How many of you have met with a dietitian who has diabetes? How many people have not met with a dietitian who have diabetes? A couple. Okay. Okay, good. Yep. That's terrific. And the reason why I ask that is because we anticipated most people having heard basic information on nutrition in the past. And so I made this talk a little bit more thought-provoking for you and a little bit towards the end interactive. So as I go through the beginning information, at the end, I'm going to ask you how you would go ahead and evaluate these meals, because that's what you have the problems doing. You can sit here and listen to the information and you're like, yeah, but then you go to a meal, you sit down and eat, and you're saying, how do I do this? So I have many meals at the end that we're going to talk about, but I'm going to ask you to give me the information. So we will go through that. All right, so what impacts your blood sugars? These are the nutrient categories, and the first one are carbohydrates, as you know, as we talk about at great length. And your carbohydrates are going to be your starches, fruit, milks, and then other carbohydrates. And we'll talk about each of those so that you know what falls into those categories. You see fruit being there. Remember, fruit is not a category. Fruit is part of carbohydrates. Your four major categories of foods are carbohydrates, meats and meat substitutes, fats, and free vegetables. 4 food categories, okay? Every food you eat has to fall into one of those 4. So you should be asking yourself with every food, is this a carb? Is this a meat? Is this a free vegetable? That's what you should be asking. And so we'll talk about each of those. So your carbohydrates, as you all know, it is the most important in managing your diabetes and keeping your blood glucose levels into the normal range. Hopefully, that's our goal. Isn't that your goal, to keep them most of the time in the normal range? That's what we're hoping for. A lot of people will listen to the media, and the media will say, oh, carbohydrates are bad. Don't consume carbohydrates. You need carbohydrates. You have to eat carbohydrates. They provide you with nutrients that are essential. And remember, I have never given anybody a diet. I've given you a meal plan, a healthy way to eat for the rest of your life. That's what I give people, because a diet means something that you start on Monday and end at some point after that. Some people by Monday afternoon, some people Friday, but you're always starting on Monday. So that's not what I give people. That's not what we talk about. We're talking about a healthy way of eating to help to control blood sugars, to meet your nutrient needs, and you have to have carbohydrates. Meats and fats slow down absorption a little bit so that you don't see such a spike in your blood sugar. It's important to have some of those. And when eaten in excess, and this is going to be an important part to realize, When eaten in excess, so people say, what's excess, LuAnn? Excess, when you receive the meal plan from myself or from my coworker Jennifer, in excess is more than what we've given you. So if we've given you 3 ounces or 4 ounces of meat and you go to Outback and eat a 16-ounce steak, that's excess. That's where you're going to go ahead and see digestion is really delayed, and it's going to keep your blood sugars elevated for a longer period of time. If you've attended classes, if you've come to any other support groups that Pat and I have done, I always bring up the example. How long, they did a study at Johns Hopkins University. They wanted to see how long it took the average person to digest 1 slice of cheese pizza. 1 slice. Not 3 or 4 like most people are used to eating, 1 slice. Cheese. It took them, they found, on average 8 hours. I will often see people with blood sugars elevated the next morning from the pizza that they ate the night before. It is not unusual because of the amount of fat. So this is a big one because a lot of us eat out and eat out often. And so when you do that and you're seeing high blood sugar numbers, it's often a result of eating too much, and then once again, the excess fat, excess protein. So that's a really important part. When we get into some of these examples, you're going to see what we're talking about. All right, so once again, if you've been through classes, met with Jennifer and I, you're going to know a lot of this stuff, but for those of you who have not, here's some basic information. Remember, these are your carbohydrates, and each portion listed is, oh, I'm sorry, I put fat choice. That should say carbohydrate choice. So pasta and rice. I always tell people never shoot the messenger. I didn't go ahead and assign these portion sizes. So it is 1/3 cup cooked of rice and pasta. That's really small. Now, I'm not telling you just to have 1/3 cup. I'm saying that that is 1 carbohydrate choice. 1 carbohydrate choice. Your cereal, we're going to go through label reading, and it's really important with cereals because cereals are highly variable. Your bread, 1 slice of whole grain, whole wheat bread, 1/2 of an English muffin, 1/4 of a bagel, 1/2 of a sandwich bun, 1 carbohydrate choice. If you have that whole English muffin, 2 carbohydrate choices. You have the whole bagel, 4 carbohydrate choices. Starchy vegetables, a small baked potato, about the size of a computer mouse. This size, this portion, most people knows what it looks like. That's actually 6 ounces. That would be 2 carbohydrate choices. Sweet potato is the same. So either or, that's your portion size of potato. 1/2 cup of corn, peas, mashed potatoes, dried beans, 1/3 cup of baked beans, all still 1 carbohydrate choice. And then I have this miscellaneous category, things like popcorn. So if you're a snacker, 3 cups of popcorn, that's a pretty big volume. That might be the thing that you go ahead and snack on in the evening. And you do have a 1 carbohydrate snack in the evening for most people. Or 15 mini pretzels, 4 to 6 crackers. You can read these labels. And the reason why we teach label reading is because we don't know the information for the thousands upon thousands of foods that are out there, or the new foods that appear on the market, or the food that you want to eat. So it's always best to be able to teach you that label reading so that you can go ahead and do so. Fruits. All right, remember, we're still talking about these carbohydrates, so these are all equal to 1 carbohydrate choice. A small piece of fruit about the size of a tennis ball is 1. If you happen to go, and that's sort of like the apples that come in the 3-pound bag, but if you happen to get the nice, delicious apples that are, coming out in fall that are like the size of softballs or small cantaloupes, that's not 1 carbohydrate choice. Now, I'm not saying you can't eat it, but I'm saying that you need to go ahead and say, this is 2 carbohydrate choices, and I have so many at this meal, and this is how I'm going to choose to use 2 of my choices. 1/3 to 1/2 cup of juice. I'm not really an advocate of juice. 2 seconds, you just downed your juice, 1 carbohydrate choice. At least with a piece of fruit, you have chewing time and at least some satisfaction of chewing and fiber. 1/2 cup of grapes, 1/2 cup of light canned fruit or unsweetened applesauce. These are nice for winter. You can put them in your pantry, you can put them in the refrigerator as you need them. They're nice options because sometimes in the winter we don't have great options for fruit. A cup of berries or melon, a small banana or 1/2 of a medium. I can tell you for the most part, most of the bananas that are out there are either 1.5 carb choices or 2. A very typical size banana is 2 carb choices. There's only one time that I have seen a small that would count as 1, and they are what you would consider to be, you would look at that and say, what is that? That's a miniature banana, and that's exactly what a small would be considered. It's about this big. It's really, really small. I know that they do sell them individually. They're Dole, they're at Walmart. It's the only place I've seen them. But those are, once again, still all 1 carbohydrate choice. Here's your milk. 1 cup, and I say the fat-free skim, or 1%, because those are your best options. You want to be trying to make lower fat, lower sodium choices, so those are going to be your best bet. The other one are 6 to 8 ounces of light yogurt. Now, a lot of people are choosing the Greek yogurt, and you can go ahead and do that, but Greek yogurts, just like other yogurts, are different in carbohydrates. So if you're going to go ahead and eat them, I recommend that you read that nutrition label, because one Greek yogurt might be 1 carb choice, another one might be 1.5 carbohydrate choices. So you need to know how much of it you're going to eat and how it's going to fit into your meal plan. Next, this is the other carbohydrate list. These are your sweets and other carbs. These are not things that we recommend that you do routinely, but I am sure as heck not going to sit here and tell you never to eat these again in your life, because you will. There's going to be a holiday, there's going to be a special occasion, a birthday, anniversary. There's going to be something that you're going to choose to have that. It's not, here's my dinner, here's my dessert. It's, here are my so many carb choices, and you must incorporate that into a meal. So if you're going to go ahead and do a 2 by 2 inch piece of cake or brownie, no icing. That's 1 carbohydrate choice. If you choose to eat the icing, which a lot of people say that's the best part, then it's 2 carbohydrate choices. So you're deciding, once again, how you're going to use your choices. 2 small cookies, a 1/2 cup of ice cream. Don't get confused by sugar-free products. Sugar-free cakes, pies, cookies, candies still have carbohydrates in them. That means that they are still affecting your blood sugar. So recognize that. The sugar-free ice cream is still a 1/2 cup for 1 carbohydrate choice. Your decision, which one do you want? And if you're thinking sorbet or sherbet is better, it's actually not. It's higher in carbohydrates. Once again, your choice. A 1/2 cup of spaghetti or pasta sauce, 1 cup soup. Remember, these products, some of these products are high in salt, so be careful when choosing them. Obviously, making a homemade soup is going to be a better option because you can control the amount of sodium that you put in it. Here are some other things that are in the other carbohydrate category. So they're combination foods. A piece of lasagna, a 3 by 4 inch piece of lasagna, is 2 carbohydrates and 2 meats. Because a lot of people say, well, you know, how do I do these mixed? Do I have to sit here and figure out that this was a casserole and it had soup in it and this and that? Nope. You can see a cup of chili or casserole, 2 carbohydrate choices and 2 meats. If you're going to do a 6-inch sub, 3 carbohydrates and 3 meats. So I always tell people, if you're out and about and you need to stop for lunch or dinner, Subway is one of the better choices. The reason is because on their menu they have listed the ones that are under 6 grams of fat. So it takes the fat elimination choice out of it. Just don't allow them to hit that bottle of mayo and go back and forth 10 times on your sub. Ask for a packet of mayonnaise or a packet of dressing. You can control the amount that you're putting on yourself. And if you do a 6-inch, then that's going to be 3 carb choices. If you have 4 carb choices at your meal, then they sell bags of cut up apples. There's your 4th carb choice. It makes it a healthy meal as opposed to trying to figure out what you're going to get at McDonald's or Wendy's or Taco Bell or any of those others. It makes it an easier thing for you to do. An 1/8 of a medium pizza, 2 carbs and 2 meats. So those are some of the other things that you need to obviously be aware of. Now we talked about the carbohydrate category. This is your meat substitute category. So 1 ounce of meat is 1 meat choice. So if you have 3 meat choices, that's 3 ounces of meat. 3 ounces of meat is equivalent to about a deck of cards. Same thickness, same dimensions. And you can see that you want to choose lean beef or fish or pork or poultry. Those are going to be obviously the ones that you think of as being meats. The things that we don't always think of as being meats that a lot of people sometimes have problems with are these substitutes. Things like cheese. Typically 1 ounce is 1 slice. Cottage cheese, a 1/4 cup. Eggs, 1, but you want to limit that for your heart health to no more than 3 per week. And then peanut butter, a tablespoon. So these all still count as one meat choice for you. Once again, options, because some people say, you know what, I'm not a great meat eater. And that's okay, there are options. For your fats, once again, each of these portions that we have listed are one fat choice. And you want to go ahead and incorporate some of this in. So your monounsaturated fats are your best fats, and they are things like your olive and canola oil. Now don't watch Rachel Ray, who puts olive oil on everything and a lot of it, and think that that's great. Look at your portion size, a teaspoon. If you're adding a tablespoon, that's 3 teaspoons. That would be 3 fats. Now I recognize if you're using that in cooking, it tends to be that you're going to be going ahead and probably not eating the full amount. So you sort of need to say, okay, I'm making this, I used a tablespoon, but I'm only eating 1/3 of it. So in reality, you would have gotten 1 teaspoon. So that's what you need to look at. It's 6 to 10 nuts. I would love to be able to tell you that you can have handfuls. That's what we all would like to eat. And once again, if you listen to the news, they say, oh yeah, nuts are good for you. They are good for you. It's a monounsaturated fat. But too much of a good fat is not a good choice. So you need to go ahead and watch these. Polyunsaturated fats are what I consider to be middle of the line kinds of fats. These are things like your margarines and your mayonnaise, salad dressings. And recognize if you do reduce fat, you can have more of it than the regular. Once again, your choice. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying that if you choose to, you get a larger portion of it. These are the bad ones, these saturated ones. So you really want to watch and be careful with how often you do these. So bacon, 1 slice. 1 slice. Not half the package, which is half the pound. 1 slice. Cream cheese, sour cream, creamer, you're half and half. They're all bad fats. They're artery clogging, cholesterol raising fats. You want to watch how often you do these. These are not very good choices. Then you have your free foods. These are your sugar-free Jell-O, not sugar-free pudding. A half a cup of sugar-free pudding, I think I had another slide, I didn't point it out, is 1 carbohydrate choice. So this is sugar-free Jell-O. And then your non-starchy vegetables. And your non-starchy vegetables are any of your vegetables except for the starchy ones that we had mentioned. The potatoes, the corn, the peas, winter squash, dried and baked beans. So anything else, we're talking with no other medication interactions. We're talking about your lettuce, carrots, green beans, cauliflower, broccoli, all of those things, zucchini, they're all options for you to go ahead and do. You can have those at any meal as much as you'd like. So be careful what you put on them because that's not free. So you want to be aware of that. So reading a label. If you can understand this, it helps to make things a little bit easier for you. So as you place your food into a food category, the ones that you place into the carbohydrate category are what you want to go ahead and read labels for. Once you place some food into a meat category, you don't need to read that nutrition label because that's your meat. When you place a food into a fat category, you don't need to read the label because that's a fat. You know portion sizes of those. The carbohydrates are what's going to be variable. So if you say, I want to go ahead and have this cereal, well, it's not flat out the same portion size. So that's where reading the label becomes important for you to go ahead and do. So the first thing that you're going to look at is a serving size. You have to know what portion the company is talking about. It's them making the decision on a portion size, not any of the portion sizes that we just went ahead and talked about. It's what they have decided. So it could be a 1/4 cup. It could be 3/4 cup. Whatever they decide upon is a serving size. The next thing you're going to look at is dietary fiber. And if the dietary fiber is 5 grams or greater, you're going to subtract it from the total carbohydrates. And once again, I would love to be able to tell you that there are a lot of foods out there like that. But unfortunately, probably about 98% of the foods that you eat will not have fiber that's 5 or greater. So for the foods that do, I encourage you to seek those foods. They tend to be in breads and cereals. Now, they are becoming much more aware of this and are trying to do that. Fiber One has come out with, other things besides their cereal, bars and crackers and Kashi, South Beach products. They tend to be the ones with the increased fiber. So only if it's 5 or greater are you subtracting. And then the other thing you're going to look at are total carbohydrates. Now, the one thing that most people think that they need to be looking at, that they do not need to be looking at, is sugar. Because sugars are part of the total carbohydrate number. Carbs are what's impacting your blood sugar, not just sugar. So you need to be looking at the total carbohydrates, not the sugar amount. So it's going to be a little bit hard to see this, but I just like to show these labels and we'll walk through this. I don't know if you can see. But the serving size at the top is 3/4 of a cup. You come down here, that's the first thing to look at. The second thing to look at is dietary fiber, and the dietary fiber is 5. Can we subtract? Yes, we can. The total carbs is 24, so 24 minus 5 is 19. Keep that 19 in your mind because we're going to have to do something with that. Over here, the serving size is a cup. And the dietary fiber, the second thing we look at is 3. Can we subtract? No, that's correct. Total carbohydrates, 22. So we have 19 for this cereal, 22 for this cereal. Let's see what that means to us. Oh. So this is a very important part of understanding reading a label. This is the conversion chart. And what this does is it converts grams of carbohydrates that we just read on the label into the carbohydrate choices that I've been talking to you about. So the first cereal we said was 19. 19 falls between 11 and 20. That tells us that that cereal would be 1 carbohydrate choice. The next cereal was 22. How many carb choices would that be? 1.5. So your decision is, do you want cereal on the left-hand side that was 3/4 cup for 1, that had a nice amount of fiber, or do you want the cereal on the right that was 1 cup for 1.5 carb choices? That would be your decision. If it would be me, I would be making the choice with the fiber, because increasing your fiber is always a good thing to go ahead and do. So that makes it a better choice. It takes your body a little bit longer to break that fiber down. So that's going to be more favorable for the blood sugars. It's going to be creating a nice slower rise in the blood sugar rather than a spike. So that's why you want to choose higher fiber foods whenever you have the opportunity to do so. All right, so if you have not met with Jennifer and I, and you're sitting there saying, well, okay, she keeps talking about these carb choices, how many should I be eating? This is a generic amount, okay? But generically, women should have about 3 to 4 carb choices at each meal. If you have a meal plan, please follow your meal plan, okay? Now, so once again, you're a woman and you say, well, what should I have, 3 or 4? Well, if you're trying to watch your weight, it's probably better to go ahead and try for the 3. Meats, 3 meat choices at lunch and dinner. 1 to 2 fat choices at meals, and then a 1 carbohydrate choice as an evening snack. Once again, general amounts. For men, you have 4 to 5 carb choices, same thing. If you're trying to watch your weight, you shoot more towards the 4 than you do the 5. About 4 meat choices, or 4 ounces of meat at lunch and dinner, 1 to 2 fat choices at each meal, and then likewise a 1 carbohydrate snack. If you don't have a meal plan, just gives you general amounts until you can go ahead and meet with a dietitian that will give you more specifics. All right, so this is the point that I'm going to ask you to think a little bit, to put your knowledge together to help me to decide how you would go ahead and assign these meals. So here's the meal. This is a pretty good meal. 4 ounces of grilled chicken with 6-ounce sweet potato, a 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce, salad with 2 tablespoons of dressing. Let's take each food. Your chicken, carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. That's correct. How many meats? 4 meats. So we have 4 meats. A 6-ounce sweet potato, carb, meat, fat, free veggie. Carb. How many? 2. That's correct. 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce. 1 what? Carb. That's correct. Salad. It is free vegetable. 2 tablespoons of dressing. It is fat. How many fats? 2 fats. You've got it. So you had 2 there and 3 there. You have 3 carb choices. You told me 4 meats. You told me 2 fats. How do you think that would affect your blood sugar? Would that be a favorable meal? It would be. That would be a meal that, when Pat and I talked to you about checking your blood sugar and doing so 2 hours later, we would anticipate your blood sugar to be under the 140 that you're looking for. Because that meal fits most meal plans that we would set up for people. It's not high in fat, it's not in excess of anything. So, does it fit into your meal plan? Pretty nicely. Let's go on to the next meal. You have a 3 by 4 inch piece of lasagna, a small dinner roll, salad with 2 tablespoons of dressing again. So your lasagna, carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. Carb and meat, that's correct. How many of each? It's 2 of each. 2 carbohydrates and 2 meats. Your dinner roll, carb, meat, fat, carb, that's correct. How many? It would be 1. If it's small, it would be 1. If you have a package, then read the label. Salad we said was free, and your dressing once again and your fat. So in here, you have 3 carbohydrates, you have 2 meats, and you're like, well, wait, that doesn't fit into my meal plan. I need a little bit more meat. You could add a little bit additional cheese to your lasagna if you chose to do that, a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top to get to your last meat. You have your 2 fats. How do you think that would impact your blood sugar? Do you think it would be favorable, or do you think it would take you a little bit longer to digest that meal? It depends on where you ate it. If you made it at home and you made it with the low-fat mozzarella and the low-fat ricotta, and you chose the 93% lean ground beef, then that probably would be okay. But if you go to Olive Garden, guess what? They're using 80-20 meat, which means it's high in fat. They're not using low-fat mozzarella, and they're not using low-fat ricotta. So in that case, and that's just not Olive Garden, that's anywhere that you're going to eat out, I would say in that case, I bet you probably your blood sugars are going to be higher 2 hours later. So it does depend on where you eat that meal. Let's continue. You're doing well. McDonald's, a 1/4 pounder with cheese and fries. Yeah, you're right. It is bad. It is quite bad. Let's break it down because once again, you need to know how to do this. The best way to go ahead and do this, if you really wanted to, 3 resources that you can utilize. Number 1, most of the chain restaurants have online websites that you can go on and get the nutrition information so that you can do what I consider your homework. And your homework would be ahead of time saying, I'm going to go to this restaurant and this is what I typically eat. How would I account for it? And once you see that, you might say, ooh, I think I'm going to make a different selection. But doing that work ahead of time so that when you walk in there, you can say, I would like to order this, but I can only have half of this meal. So figuring it out beforehand is often a very important thing. Like I said, chain restaurants have websites with nutrition information. If it happens to be North Park Lounge, they don't have nutrition information, but you can go on to Applebee's or Max and Irma's or other websites and go ahead and say, this is a meal very similar, and it would at least give you a better idea. So McDonald's, definitely you could get the information right in the restaurant, on the website. Another option for you is Calorie King. They have either a book or a website. So those are resources for you to go ahead and help you with some of this. So let's break down the 1/4 pounder. Carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. There is some meat, and there are some carbs. So how many carbs? There are 2 carbs. How many meats? 4. It's a 1/4 pounder. That's a 1/4 pound. 16 ounces is a pound. Yeah, that's right. It's 4. So you're looking at four meats. Okay, so you have your cheese. What's cheese? Carb, meat, fat, free vegetable? Meat. And they're going to put on 1 slice, which is going to be how many meats? That's correct. So now you're up to 5 meats and 2 carbs. All right, so these medium fries. I hear carbs. How many? 4. You get that large, you're looking at 6. This really doesn't fit into your meal plan. All right, somebody had said, I asked, what about this meal? And they said, not good. I would agree. That's why I made the suggestion for Subway earlier, because then you're not faced with the fry option, and it does make it a better choice. So definitely with this, I would anticipate a blood sugar 2 hours later to be higher. Let's look at another meal. 2 pieces of thick crust pizza with pepperoni and mushrooms. Carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. Carb. How many carbs? Depending on where you get it, it's going to be 4 to 6. Okay, so if you're going to Pizza Hut, jump on Pizza Hut's website. But it's going to be at least 4. How many meats? 2 per slice, plus a little extra with the pepperoni. Not much, but a little. So if you're looking at this, you're looking at a minimum of 4 carbohydrates, 4 meats, and a ton of fat. Now, once again, if you're making this yourself, you're able to buy the crust, you're able to read the label, you're probably not going to go ahead and put oil all over that crust, soak it in there potentially overnight, so you can make this a lower fat option if you're cooking it yourself. But if you're getting pizza anywhere else, it is definitely going to be high fat. And remember the example that I said, I will often meet with people and say, why were your blood sugars so high this morning? Pizza the night before. Chinese, 1 cup of wonton soup, a medium egg roll, half a restaurant serving of General Tso's chicken. All right, so the wonton soup, carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. It is a carb. How many? 1. That's correct. A medium egg roll. It is a carb. How many? It is going to be about 1.5 to 2, yes. And a half a serving of General Tso's chicken. Carb, meat, fat, or free vegetable? It is meat and carbs. So let's talk about this. If you had, we'll just say that it was a half of a serving, you're not going to get much more than about 5 ounces in there. So you're having half that amount. Any guesses on the carbohydrates? It says a half a serving. I hear it's sweet. You're right. I heard 3. Try 5. Chinese food is one of the things that I say be very careful with this, because there's a lot of hidden carbohydrates in the sauces that you don't even think about. You think, oh, General Tso's chicken. Yeah, it's a little bit sweet. Maybe it's a carb. So you're looking at about 4 meats with the chicken, maybe 3 or 4, but you're looking at 5 carbs there, another 1 to 2 there, another 1 there. Blood sugars, definitely high after that. Lastly, you have a cup of wedding soup and 6 saltine crackers. Your wedding soup, carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. It is carb. Often there's not enough of the meatballs that can be considered a meat. Usually it's an insignificant amount. But if you're making it yourself, and you know that each one of the meatballs that you made is an ounce, and you have 1 in your soup, or if each meatball is a half of an ounce and you have 2, then you can count it. But typically it's not quite enough. And then 6 saltine crackers. Carb, meat, fat, free vegetable. Carb. How many? It is 1. So you had here, you had 2 carbs, maybe 1 meat, a little bit of fat in the soup. Do you think that this is a good meal? It is not. And why? It's not enough. So a lot of times people in the wintertime, this is what they would do for a meal. Now, if you don't take in enough carbohydrates, your body can produce glucose all on its own. So don't think the less I eat, the better off I am. And then you're not getting the nutrients. Remember, you need to go back to these amounts that we talked about. Where is that? Did I blow right through it? Yeah, this one, sorry. This is what you should be doing, 3 to 4, not 1 or 2. And you should be doing about 3 meats at lunch and dinner, not 1. This will help to create that nice slow rise and fall in the blood sugars. That's what you're looking to achieve. Not how little can I eat and get away with this. This is what you're hoping to achieve. That's what you're shooting for. Not less, and not more. All right, so we have a couple minutes for questions. You can. A half a cup of dried beans, so that would be your black beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans. Half a cup of that is one carb, and would be one meat choice. So yes.
I have a recipe for sweet potato black bean chili.
Okay.
And it doesn't have any meat in it, so.
The beans could be your source of protein. I typically don't tend to talk much about that, number one, because a lot of people don't eat beans. And number two, it's one of the things that, for the most part, people are having meat, and then to count the beans, they have trouble with that. So in that case, yes, it could be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes?
Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I know that tofu is a good source of protein.
It is?
And I also, even though it's high in sodium, occasionally I use the meat substitutes. And
they likewise are options for you, sure. And then
yeah,
you would be
but they
using
are
the
high in
beans.
sodium, so you have to watch it.
You do have to watch, yes. So if you are a vegetarian, then those are options, tofu and the substitutes.
How about if you take Metamucil at night? How does that affect us?
Metamucil at night, I would check the carbs and what you're mixing it with, or simply the Metamucil itself. That would be more of the important question that I would have.
I was hoping to get a couple ideas of cereals without having to read all the things. Like, are there good cereals out there that other diabetics have used?
I think any cereal that has fiber content is going to be a better choice. You're still going to need to read that label to get for those three things. You know, your better choices are going to be things such as your Cashy cereal, the Go Lean or the Crunch have 10 grams of fiber in them. And so a cup of those only count as one carb choice. They're very filling. A cup is a nice amount. So I like that as an option. Your Fiber One is going to have more than 5 grams of fiber. Non-generic Raisin Bran is going to have 5 grams of fiber. Bran Flakes, Glucerna cereal, and that is found with the diabetes supplies, not in the cereal aisle. But there are other ones out there that I'm just not even aware of that you might say, oh, this looks good. So check out those three things. But those are going to be some of your better choices.
So like Cheerios, stay away from?
No, I'm not saying stay away from it. But if you're asking me what are the better choices, it's always going to be the ones that are higher in fiber.
Okay.
And your Cheerios don't have 5 or more grams.
Okay.
I'm not saying you can't eat it. I'm just saying it's going to be a matter of your choice.
Okay.
A half a cup of cooked cereal is one carbohydrate choice. So a couple hands up.
You made reference to meat and the percentage of fat. I always thought if you got like a 92% with, you know, whatever, I thought you cooked out the extra fat. Isn't that true?
No, there's always going to be some fat in there. You're not going to cook it all out.
Really?
And the restaurants all have 80-20.
Mm-hmm.
And I embarrassed my boyfriend the one night by asking the question. He's like, what are you talking about? What are you asking about the meat for? And I said, because I want to know what they use. Mm-hmm. And the waitress didn't know. She's like, well, I don't understand the question. I said, can you just go back and ask the kitchen? And it is 80-20. And I've asked on several other occasions. So it's a really high fat meat. Some of it's going to cook out, but definitely not all of it.
Okay.
I was told that all cereal is bad. It's anything with wheat products is not good.
Unfortunately, you've been misinformed because your cereals give you lots of nutrients, lots of vitamins.
Well, what about rolled oats? Rolled oats and cooked, like just basically rolled oats. Is that
you
a
can
good?
do that. Oatmeal, sure. A half a cup of cooked oatmeal is going to be one carbohydrate choice. Be careful of oatmeal, and the only reason why I say that is because over the years I've been doing this, one of the foods that I've noted that does have an impact on people's blood sugars that you might not think is oatmeal. So if you are an oatmeal eater, check your blood sugars 2 hours later. And I've had this happen numerous times over the years. For whatever reason, it spikes people's blood sugars.
Well, don't all sugars or all cereals contain a lot of sugar, and
No.
they don't.
They contain carbohydrates because that's what comprises them.
Well, what about
But it's
wheat?
not bad.
What about wheat products like wheat breads and so forth? I was told wheat products are not good for diabetics to eat.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, you've been totally misinformed. Yeah, they are a good choice, especially if you're seeing whole grain or whole wheat. So if you go to bread and the first ingredient is whole grain flour, that's what you're looking for. Whole wheat flour, that's what you're looking for. If the first ingredient on the bread is wheat flour, it's been refined just like white. Those are better choices. The cereals with the higher fiber are going to be better choices. And as I said, they provide you with a great source of carbohydrates, other vitamins, and nutrients. So nope, your cereals and wheat products are fine for you to incorporate in.
Free.
You have it. The question is gluten-free diets. And gluten-free, you have to avoid wheat, oat, malt, barley, and rye. Unfortunately, that makes your job a little bit more difficult. There are a lot more products out there that are gluten-free, so a lot more choices. You still need to count your carbohydrates in them. So with that, you're reading labels, counting the carbohydrates, and fitting it into the meal plan.
And also, what do you think if a person has their main meal at lunch?
I'm sorry, what at lunch?
The main.
You know what? As you saw up
lunchtime.
there is no main meal. You're having 3 to 4 carbohydrate choices at meals. You're having 3 meat choices at lunch and dinner. There's not a bigger meal. So you shouldn't be eating any more at one meal versus another, because what's going to happen is your blood sugars probably are going to be higher. Your body can't keep up with that increased amount. So whether you're on oral medications or insulin, if you're taking a medication and you overeat, it's just not going to be enough to do the job to keep the blood sugars controlled. And so there is no larger meal. The lunch and dinner are often exactly the same.
Thank you.
The question is it okay to use Splenda? Yes, it is. So your Sweet and Low, your Equal, Splenda are all alternatives for sweeteners. They do not impact the blood sugars. So yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I have a question about losing weight. I've been trying to lose weight. At one time, before I was insulin dependent, I used the South Beach diet. I know there are a lot of diets out there. I guess we're restricted as diabetics as to the kind of diet that we can use to lose weight.
If you are making good choices, because you can make poor choices and still be following those amounts that I told you, if you are really interested in the weight loss, I would go ahead and journal what you're eating, keeping track of, is the food a carb, is it a meat, is it a fat, and then use the Calorie King resource that I had mentioned, and they give calories in addition to carbohydrates and fats. So if you're really diligent about it, you can go through and see the calorie level. If you're doing the 4 to 5 carb choices as a man with the 4 meats, you're probably consuming about 1,700 to maybe 2,100 calories. That's really appropriate for a man. What can happen is that sometimes you eat too little. And when any person eats too little, it can put your body into a starvation mode. And your body says, oh, he's feeding me. I need to take this and store this, and it does it as fat because it says, I'm not sure when he's going to feed me again. And I've seen this with somebody as small as she was 125 pounds and she had gained 10 pounds. You're all sitting there saying, I wish I weighed 125. But she gained 10 pounds. That's a significant weight gain. And she cut back so much on what she was eating that when she started to follow the plan, she had actually lost 3 pounds in 4 weeks. So you don't want to put your body into a starvation mode. You want to make sure that you're feeding it adequate calories, not too much and not too little.
But just as a follow-up question, it isn't as simple as we can go to the South Beach or we can go to Weight Watchers. You know, those options are out because we're diabetics. Am I correct in my assumption?
They're not necessarily out. It just makes it more difficult. Weight Watchers does points, and their points have no correlation to carbohydrates. So they also don't say that you need to evenly distribute your meals. And so that's really important that you get those consistent carbohydrates. As I described earlier, if you overeat at a meal, then, and depending on what medication, if you undereat at a meal, you could be low. If you overeat at a meal, whether you're on oral, no medications, or insulin, you could be high. So that's why it's important to have the consistency at the meals that those quote-unquote diets don't do. The other part of the other part of the weight loss that's a really important part is exercise, because that's going to help to burn calories. And so once you get your doctor's approval to go ahead and start some type of exercise routine, that would be highly advantageous to you for a number of reasons. One, because obviously it helps to burn calories. It will also help to decrease blood sugars. Being on insulin, you want to be very careful that you don't actually go too low. And so making sure that you take glucose tablets with you when you exercise so that if you do feel hypoglycemic, you have a form of treatment with you, but the exercise has to be the second part of that. You can only do so much with what you're eating. It has to be the dual of the exercise with the healthy eating.
Does the order you eat, does that affect it? Like the fat first or carbohydrate first?
Nope. If you're eating all of those things at one time, that's what you're looking to do. You don't want to space them. You don't want to go ahead and eat, carbohydrates now and then in a half hour eat that. You want to eat them all at one time, but it doesn't matter in what order you eat them.
No, but I mean in a meal. I always have oatmeal first. Should I have maybe a piece of bacon first, or no?
Nope. Just as long as you're eating it, within one set time.
You had the men for 1,700 to 2,100 calories.
It's an approximate.
What is it for women?
Probably about, if you're following that, roughly about 1,300 to maybe 1,700. And it really is going to depend on if you do that 3 to 4, and it's really going to depend on your choices. You can have one carbohydrate choice, like the Fiber One bars. A lot of people are choosing them. They're 160 calories. They're one carb choice. You have a medium-sized apple, that's one carb choice too, but that's more along the lines of 60 to 70 calories. So I give a rough estimate because we don't talk in terms of calories for diabetes. It's not calories that are raising your blood sugars. It's the composition of what you're eating, the carbs, the meats, the fats. That's what's impacting your blood sugars, not necessarily calories. So we don't talk in terms of calories, but just so you have an idea as ballpark as to the calorie consumption.